You guys are live and ready?
I would much rather be in.
We can go ahead and start.
Sure.
You're live.
We got to lose.
Do they know we're on?
All right. Are we ready? Is everything all set?
Ready?
I think he said we were on.
You're live.
Okay, great.
Right.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the March 12th, 2025 Finance Board meeting. I'll call the meeting to order at 5:05 PM. The first item on our agenda tonight is to get an update on the fiscal year 26 budget from Rebecca based on some revisions that have been made for school assessments and a couple of other items that have come in since our last meeting.
Thank you. So as you'll see in the handout that was provided to you via email through the chair, there were a couple of updates to the budget that was originally submitted to the board at the last meeting, and then after, when we also received some updates, which is why we are moving into a schedule that allows us to release the budget a little bit later, so that you're not seeing all those changes all throughout the process, so that we can give you a more finalized product. Because obviously, as you can see with the small numbers that we have, when something changes, it becomes $1,000 here, $2,000 there, that kind of thing. So the biggest changes that you'll see as this proposed budget is that the Pentucket Regional School District and the school committee voted on an updated assessment for the town. And so instead of the original proposal of a 7.2% increase over last year's assessment, they have decreased that so that it will be a 3.3% increase over last year's fiscal year assessment. So it's a little over the 3% that we were hoping for, so therefore we did have to make adjustments in order to accommodate. Additionally, we did receive correspondence from the Essex Technical School, and they are looking to apply a flat fee for special education costs. We are in the middle of trying to figure out whether or not that is something that they are allowed to do. There's some question about fairness in that regard, because not every single student with a special need requires the same level of services, and therefore to apply a flat rate could be unreasonable in terms of what the community is being asked to put forward. So we did have to adjust our numbers, and luckily for that particular line item, we did over budget last year due to some misinformation about the enrollment that we had and some late information that was provided to us. So we were decreasing that line item anyway, but once we got the updated information, we had to increase it a little bit more than we thought we had to, so that resulted in an increase, or excuse me, a change in the budget. And then the other educational expense that came in that we had not envisioned is that originally with the Whittier vocational technical assessment, we had a verbal conversation with the business manager, and we're looking more along the lines of a 7% increase over last fiscal year. Again, for Whittier, we're talking more along the lines of last fiscal year. For fiscal year 25, it was $661,000. So it was based upon the 2 new students that we received. So we went to 39 students. It actually went up to 9%. So the total went up to 723,933. So that was another increase that we had not anticipated as part of the original proposal. And then the last increase that you'll see as part of the budget falls under insurance. We are part of the Group Insurance Commission, the GIC. They typically don't come out with their finalized figures until around this time frame. So the initial conversation and the initial discussion with the GIC, they were looking between a 10 to 13% increase. So we had estimated about like 11.5% increase. So overall, across the board, it was a 13.5% increase for their rates, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a 13.5% increase, because we have different plans within our program that we're allowed to elect. So we applied the percentages to those specific plans with the employees that we currently have, and also anticipated potentially adding I believe, 2 new employees at the highest paid, or the highest plan that you could possibly equate to. So we had to increase that original line item beyond what we had originally shared with you. But those are the only other items that you can see that were increased based upon what we had originally proposed to the finance board. And then other line items were reduced in order to accommodate those changes based upon the budget that was originally shared with the finance board. And if there's specific questions about any of those, I'd be happy to answer them.
Just real quick, Rebecca, I think you had mentioned something about revenues changing. Was there a specific?
Yes, there was a slight revenue change that we had made, and that was in regards to the firearm safety class. We have a firearm safety class that the police department put forward, and so when you take that class, you receive, well, you have to pay. And so based upon the laws with the state, there's a certain portion that we must pay them, and then whatever monies we get back go into running the course. That would constitute as a revolving fund. We were treating it as a special revenue fund, so we needed to, or we need to, at the next town meeting, make that adjustment and create that revolving fund so that we can make sure that those funds are going back into the operation of the class. But those revenues that were generated for the class are now put into the police fees. And then you can correct me if I'm
They're
wrong.
kind of two different things. So you pay for the class. You have to have the class to be able to get your license to carry. But then I think you pay a $100 fee to get your license to carry. It's the $100 fee that 75 goes to the state, 25 stays with us. So they were both set up as just special revenue funds, but the class should be a revolving fund because the fee, you know, there's an officer that gets paid out of that fund to run that class. The fee pays for the class and anything they need to buy for that class. The fee should be should be split. So the 75 should go into an agency fund because we're technically collecting the money for the state, and then the state bills us. You pay the bills out of the agency fund, it should zero out. And the $25 should go into the general fund, which it seems like it averages around 3,000. So, and they had been buying, I think, ammunition and stuff with it. So what we did was we put 3,000 into local receipts for PD, and then put 3,000 in their general fund expense budget to cover the ammunition that they usually buy with it. So it's all the same revenues and expenses, it's just reported a little differently and following the law.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about those changes?
I guess just just like scrolling, it looks like, because to change the estimate for the Pentucket assessment from 3% to 3.3% is substantial on that much of our budget. So what was primarily affected looks like the reserve fund, the legal budget, the planner position. Would you say those were the
Correct.
main sources?
Casualties.
I'm sorry?
Those are the casualties of the,
Yes, those were the main line items. We had hoped to bring the town planner salary line item to what it was in fiscal year '24. We were unable to do that, so we reduced that down. And then the other was the legal line item. And then additionally, there was I had made a small decrease in the 10%. I had I think it was a 5% contingency in the technology line item, and I reduced that to a 4%. And then in our Medicare tax, we had just level funded it from prior years at 65, which was a little bit, had a little bit wiggle room, but we did the calculation again, and so we said we could probably take a little from that line item and still be fine within what we had for the wages per the calculation that we needed to do to estimate that. So we took a couple of thousand from there as well. So it was kind of the biggest ones were, like you said, the technology, the reserve, and the town planner, and then the smaller ones were just a grant here, a grant there kind of thing.
And the 3.3% that they came up with was just the best that they could do, and to get down to where kind of we had targeted.
Correct. I believe it averaged out for 4% for Merrimack, due to their enrollment numbers. I do know that they tried to be a little bit more creative, if you will, in terms of what they were looking to make up that revenue from. I think last fiscal year, they used a lot of their free cash to close that gap between what they were trying to do and what they were able to assess and what they were able to get from the state. And that left a big hole. And as we know, whenever you use free cash like that on a continuous type of operation, it ends poorly. So I think they tried to increase fees. I think they tried to increase rental fees, user fees. I believe they're going to be offering pre-K full-time at a charge. So they are looking at ways to be somewhat of a revenue generator, which is not necessarily what their mission is, but in order to supplement those funds that they're not getting from us or the state. And that was something that they were able to do, or what they're estimating that they could do within reason, which left us with the 3.3% to close that remaining portion.
I know that they entertained school choice, bringing that back at the
Yes.
high school level, which I think is also a creative solution. So I was happy to see that. So,
Yeah, I do have a quick question. Just, it's more of a technical question, just so I understand. The cost of us doing business with Pentucket is because they are our primary school. That's a budgetary item, I get that. But as far as Whittier Tech and Essex Tech, their fees, are those direct charges to the town? In other words, those really aren't negotiable. It's X amount of dollars for a student, and that's what we have to pay, correct?
So that's correct for all of our educational assessments. So we have Whittier Technical School, which we're a member of. So there's 11 communities, and we are a member of Whittier Tech. So if there's a trade that's not offered, or a class that's not offered at the Pawtucket Regional Middle and high school, you can go to Whittier Tech, but you do have to apply. If they do not offer a certain expertise, like turf management services, I think it's agricultural or something, you can go to Essex Tech. But if you wanted to go to Whittier and you wanted to go for carpentry and you applied and you didn't get in, you couldn't go to Essex Tech because we're not a member community and take carpentry. But you could apply to Essex Tech and take it for agricultural because that's not offered at Whittier Tech. So for Essex Tech, it's specifically you're charged for the student and only the student attending, and not the capital needs, et cetera. It's called Chapter 74 for those specific students that are not part of or non-residential. And then we have an assessment with the Whittier Vocational School, which includes capital, and we are a member community, so we do need to abide by the regional school agreement. And then the same with Pentucket. We are part of the regional school agreement and need to abide by those rules as part of the regional agreement.
Yeah, because, I mean, just because I have some ignorance towards the process, why I'm asking the questions. The Pentucket school system, obviously, they came back with a 3.3% increase, but that was working with the communities that make up that school system.
Correct.
But with Whittier Tech, with their 9% increase, it's just a fee that we're kind of,
Nope, it's based upon how many students we have enrolled. So we have 39 students that will be enrolled, so there's a fee that we're at, based upon, so the same kind of thing happens with Pentucket. So Pentucket has we have our minimum school contribution that we must apply for, and then they provide an assessment for the remaining revenues that are needed in order to operate for that fiscal year. And then that gets broken down in between 3 communities by a percentage, and that percentage is formed by the enrollment. So those numbers that you see on the budget book with the enrollment for each individual school comes into play. So that is multiplied by what is required, by what they need, and then you get what our percentage is.
okay, then my last question is this, where Pentucket is, I hate to use the word, but they're kind of forced to work within budgetary constraints of the communities that make them up. Whittier does not seem to be doing that because they have a 9% increase. And I'm just wondering, what is the checks and balances on that side of the formula so that we have a little bit more ability to have some level of control of the expenditure to that particular school system that we are technically part of?
We don't technically have that much level of flexibility to deal with the assessment that comes from Whittier. We are only, again, we're one member of 11 member district. And so the community with the most students is Haverhill. So they pay more in terms of their operational fee to Whittier. But then there's the capital side of things, which is different as well. And as we all learned from the other building project, that's based upon all eligible students that would be able to go to Whittier. But we do have a school committee representative, and that school committee representative is appointed and chosen by the Pentucket Regional School District, and they are supposed to represent the interest of Groveland and the students that attend Whittier that are from Groveland. So I would say that when you have specific questions or desires to figure out exactly how they're supporting Groveland and supporting Groveland students, it's going to be that school committee member. Because the same type of situation applies if we're assessed, we don't get really a chance to say no. We have to come up with the funding, or else we have to go through an override, just like we talked about with the building project. It's not really a matter, it's one of those obligations that we have, unless we were to leave their regional district.
So, okay, all right, thank you, Madam Chair, thank you for letting me ask the question.
It's not optional is what you're saying.
Essentially.
Go ahead.
The spreadsheets you sent us, FY 2026 budget workbook in FinCom, is that the one?
If FinCom 2, and then there's 3 tabs. One of them's the revenue tab, and then there's one that's been edited, then the other was the expenditure tab, and then the one that's been edited.
Oh, yeah, I have 4 tabs,
Yep.
actually, but the 2 revenue tabs look identical, but there's no detail.
It's just the local receipts is the one that changed, and the local receipts is exactly what Ellen had mentioned with the $100 fee or the which one was it? I keep getting them
The
switched.
license.
Okay, so it's not exploded, you just gave us the
It's so
summary.
minuscule, because it's just the local receipt that changed.
Yeah, okay, so you're going with the 242129. $242129, okay, against the 242125.
Correct. And it's just the local receipts that you'll see the change between the two numbers. Everything else stayed the same. All
So right
of
now,
the-
we're only looking at a $377 shortfall,
Yeah.
chunk change in it,
You got that, right?
$22 million. It's pretty cool. And 3.3% increase from the school. It's the best they've done in the last 2 decades. I mean, so,
But to your point too, I mean, the issue is when you're putting a 9% on 600 and you're putting a 3% on 11 million, it definitely makes a difference.
And, sorry to interject, but you were able to find the budget. Obviously, the budget you were able to figure out on the 3%, but for the 3.3%, was there available funding to support that at this point in time?
no, we took some
No.
casualties,
That's arguable.
yeah.
We balance.
We borrowed from Peter to pay Paul.
So basically, you were able to balance it, but you had okay, all right, thank you.
And school choice, I can't believe it came up, because everything I heard about school choice was such a disaster for the district, because we never got nearly the funds that it took to educate the student coming in from another district.
From what I was
Surprised that came
told, from what I was informed when we had our last meeting with just this last Tuesday, was that it was only high school.
Yeah.
Because the issue that, like you rightfully pointed out, is that if you were to accept school choice, you own that student throughout their time there at the
Tenure.
school. But to start at the high school was less of a risk, and there was a little bit more room in those areas to potentially support such. But they acknowledge that it's not without risk if there's a student with behavioral issues or something of that nature. But they note that there is income coming from the district for those students that could help support the operations of the school.
Would it be legal just to start at the high school? I mean,
Yeah.
really?
Because I do know it depends on what you have available too. Like I know in certain school districts that my children are a part of, if the fourth grade class is too full, you don't have school choice for fourth grade or fifth grade, but you have school choice for sixth grade or seventh grade. So I know they can limit the amount of students that they take for school choice per the students that they have already.
I think they said they'll accept 20 per grade at the high school.
Up to.
Up to.
The committee voted to accept
In the
up
high
to
school.
20 per grade, only at the high school level. Right, so at the high school level, there's a lot more, well, there's such a large amount of administration in place, and then at the high school level, there is more flexibility as far as classroom sizes. If a history teacher has a larger class, it's not like a kindergarten class where you just can't handle 23 kids versus 20 kids.
Oh, I hear you.
So I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a creative solution. It makes a lot of sense. And, to me, one of the questions I've had in my mind is, you see all the other school districts doing school choice. We weren't. Enrollment was going down. Why was it it just, didn't make sense to me that in some instances it makes sense, in some instances it doesn't make sense. And so this solution to do it only at the secondary level where they do have room and flexibility makes a lot of sense to me.
So nobody's worried that some fancy glory-seeking ACLU lawyer is going to come along and say, I want my fifth grader in there too. Why are you discriminating against my fifth grader?
I think you asked that question to the school committee and this, I'm making the assumption that our administration handles that correctly. I don't think that's for us to question. I think if they make the decision, they make the decision, and that's on them.
Question maybe not. Worry about if there's a legal case, that could fall on us. So, just wondering, user fees. What type of user, are they talking, I love it when they charge the, AAU teams to use the baseball field and this and that. And that's great, because that's OPM, as far as I'm concerned. But are they talking about raising user fees on the students for like math lab and soccer team and cheerleading? Or is it just users?
I think it was $50 for sports.
It was $50 increase for
each
athletic
sport.
fees. It was changing the structure of the preschool and the school choice.
Yeah, and then rentals of the space would increase, so if someone wanted to rent space for a program,
Yeah,
then
that-
they would increase that rent as well.
Absolutely. But the other fees are basically an extra tax upon the citizens of the district. Let's face it. That's
Well,
what it is.
Yeah, and it's an extra user fee for the people that are actually using that service, as opposed to, having to have a general override that's going to tax the elderly who are already paying for the new school building and everything else and aren't using the school anymore. It's taxing the people who are using it. You don't have to have it. You don't have to pay the athletic fee. That's an optional thing. And I know that they always do entertain accommodations for people that really can't afford it. But I think it focuses that on the users, and they too will age out.
And I agree. I guess I'm just disappointed because, as I recall, when we went through the big override a couple of years ago, one of the reasons given was they didn't want to increase the fees on the students who, actually gets paid for by the parents, let's face it. And they were hoping to either eliminate or decrease the fees, but now they're actually increasing the fees. So either I misunderstood, or if I understood correctly, it's disappointing to me that it's gone the other way. But, oh well, okay.
Well, I think it's better than forcing an override on us that will, and taking away from our own town services, which we are taking away from our own town services. This wasn't, the 3.3% wasn't something that we could
Oh, I'm not
necessarily
disagreeing with you
afford.
at
So I
all.
do feel like it was an accommodation on both sides. It was difficult decisions on both sides.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. I just, as I recall the conversation, I'm just disappointed at the outcome, that it didn't come into fruition.
It did, and then another budget season came with
Well, no,
more costs that
the
we
fees
could.
never went down and they were never
did.
eliminated.
The fees went up. Say 3 years ago, the fees went down after the override passed, and now the fees are coming back.
I don't know, I had children in that school right through that period, and the fees never went down. So, I'm not sure.
That's my recollection.
My checkbook says differently. But all right. Alas,
Rebecca, our assessment is our assessment. They can't come back to us for additional if their revenue sources don't pan out as they expected. Because I do know the pre-K modifications have not been well received by the community members. It's 100% increase in the fee for them.
But it's full day then, instead of half day.
Oh, they still have a half-day option at
So that would be
100%
for the full
increase.
day. And then, so from what it was explained to me, again,
Yeah.
at that meeting, was that, as a parent and you put your child in daycare who's in pre-K,
Mike?
you're spending about,
Your mic.
Your mic.
You're spending about $1,800 a month, maybe for 4 days, if not, 5 days, if you can get that. So this would just be $1,000 a month. So it would actually be less than what you're paying at a private care for a full-day operation. And I also believe that they did take into consideration surrounding areas and what those communities were also offering for full-day kindergarten as well, like Georgetown and some of the other communities. And they
There
were
are-
actually under what they had proposed or were proposing for the next 3 years.
Okay. Because there's a couple that are actually closing. So they're, I'm assuming, hoping to pull in kids that might have gone to those locations.
I would imagine. And again, I'm not as well-versed on what their plan is. I just got the,
I'm just trying to make
Highlights.
sure, like, our assessment is our assessment.
yes.
They're taking on these risks of, these user fees or whatever fees, however they want to phrase it.
We got the
is-
official assessment letter saying that our total assessment was going to be the 14,189,237, and that includes the capital assessment. So that is our assessment.
Okay. I'll take it. Anyone else? All right, great.
Just
thank you.
real quick on that, is that kicking the can down the road if they come up short this year, then we're gonna have to make up for it next year?
Well, I'm assuming if they're short for it this year, they're not gonna directly say they're coming.
Well, I get
But
where you're
down the
going.
road is the
is-
revenue stream is gonna be less than what their,
Projection.
Right, but if
projections.
they're projecting 100 kids in the pre-K and they get 50, now they're gonna be X amount of dollars short. Is that on us to make it up next year? Whatever they are short this year?
That'll be on the whole entire budget.
yeah, so it'll just be built into their new budget next year.
Well, they might eliminate a teacher based on the enrollment.
It's very similar to our budget. So essentially, we can't end the year in a deficit. So if we're projecting our revenues as we're projecting them and say something happens and like local receipts being one of the key ones, or motor vehicle excise, and we're saying we're gonna collect this, and all of a sudden that comes in under, if we can't fill it with other revenue that we've generated, say, we under budgeted permits and licenses and that came in higher, then, ooh, okay, we're good, we're safe, we're able to cover what we needed on this expenditure side. But if they're all coming in under, then we can't end the year in a deficit, and we have to go to town meeting and try and find the funds, and/or we need to lay off and/or cut employees and stop the hemorrhaging, if you will, because we we can't operate on money, we can't spend in a deficit. Legally, we can't do that.
But yes, that was kind of my thought process of down the road,
Yeah.
how it will be built in going forward. Okay, great, thank you. The next item on our agenda is an update on the community preservation projects. So I'll turn it over to Adam to give us an update on that.
All right, so first article we're gonna have is for the 10% set-asides into the open space, historic preservation, and community housing. That's a requirement. This year, it's gonna be 68,200. And then we also have a set-aside for administrative expenses of 35,000. On that note as well, they released a projection for what the match would be for fiscal year '26 for the first round distribution, and that is at 15.9%. And then we're eligible for the second and third round because we do it at 3%. And that'll be, you know, TBD with whatever magical formula they use.
So do we have a list of what the projects are?
Yeah, I can run through them right here for you. I can send them out to you if you'd like to
Have
look.
you guys voted on them yet?
No,
Ye- We voted on them 2 meetings ago, and then we finalized them on our meeting Monday night. So we are good
So
with
the
all the
vote is
projects.
official.
So we'll be looking for a finance board recommendation on them,
as part of the warrant.
yeah,
Yep.
for part of the warrant here. So we have Save Our Last Historic Mill Building. This was 46 Washington Street, the old water department building. The original proposal was for $122,000 to do windows, doors, masonry repairs, heating system, septic system. After we bounced that around the committee, we decided to cut the project down to $7,000 to only do environmental testing on the building. The reason for that mainly is because the applicant did not get permission from the select board for the desired use of the building. And that's in flux, but the committee feels that the $7,000 for the environmental testing, regardless of which way the select board decides to go with the property, would be money well spent, information that would be good to know going into it. And that's, you know, lead, asbestos, things of that nature.
And then the applicant could then apply in a future period if the
Absolutely.
Board of
If the Board of
Select
Selectmen
Board
approves
decides
the
to
use.
move forward. Okay,
I also know there's, after the last select board meeting, they're looking at doing a use study of the building first to kind of see what the best use for the town would be. Whether it's to renovate it as a historic building, or to sell it, or to do whatever with it.
Well, I'm not gonna weigh in on that, because you're only taking 7,000. And the original draft was, you know, we'll do the work, we'll pay the money, we'll
Yeah,
try to find out what we can use for it. That's where I got held up. You gotta know, if you're gonna keep the building, because we wanna be in the real estate business, Art Studio is not going to pay the expenses on that place.
I don't disagree with you.
The heat, the insurance, upkeep, all that, we don't belong in the real estate business.
No, and that's exactly why we kicked it to, you
Good.
know, if you don't have permission from the care and custody of the select board, then, you
Good
know,
job.
that was kind of my take on it.
What was the other ones?
Are we ready to go on to the next one? Any more questions on that particular one? So the next one is a trail enhancement project. Now, this is a combination of a project that had expired and a new project. They are looking for $73,000 under the category of recreation. Project will preserve and enhance town properties and trails with a partnership between the Groveland Rec Committee and the Conservation Commission. Project will assess the status and rehabilitation needs of trails on conservation and other protected town properties. The project will rehabilitate, enhance, and implement signage, trail marking, bridges, benches, kiosks, and other improvements on the trails for all properties. So there's 4 trail systems in town, one of them being VZ Park. This project for VZ Park will provide 2 benches, 12 trail markers, 8 trail signs, 6 trail map signs, 1 trash container, 2 dog waste containers, and a kiosk.
How much is that portion?
It's
It's
an
all-
omnibus.
all- okay.
On the Meadow Pond Reservation, 2 benches, 6 trail markers, 6 trail signs, 10 trail map signs, 1 trash container, 1 dog waste container, and 3 bridges. On the Merrimack River Trail, 2 benches, 20 trail markers, 4 trail signs, 2 trail map signs, 1 trash container, 1 dog waste container, and 1 kiosk. And then on the Groveland Community Trail, 2 benches, 10 trail signs, 4 trail map signs, 2 dioramas, and then we actually made a change to the last meeting. Originally, they had 4 trash containers and 3 dog waste containers. We've changed it to include a solar-powered compactor at one location as kind of a trial run. And the theory behind that was on the other 3 sets of trails, the trash and dog waste is going to be picked up by volunteers. On the Groveland Community Trail, they had anticipated the highway department being able to pick up the trash. The highway department said that wasn't feasible and had recommended going with the compactor because it only needs to be emptied every 2 to 3 months. And they would be amenable to emptying it every 2 or 3 months versus, a weekly pickup of a half a dozen trash cans.
Can I ask a question on that? The Groveland Community Trail? I just might be misunderstanding the trail. Why would we need maps? And isn't it just one long?
Straight line?
Straight line?
A long trail.
You could get.
With 2
lost.
pieces? So maps and
You could take a right.
6 trailheads?
There are, no, there's not, 1.
2, 3, 4.
Looks like they have one at every intersection or every terminus.
Those aren't already there? Signages for it?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not familiar with it.
I do know that the mile markers were something that we wanted to include as part of the trail that we never got to. And I do know that as part of the community trail, there are different parts of the trail where they connect to other trail networks that you can go through. So I know, like, if you were to try and go by the horse farm, there's a little trail off to the side that will actually get you by 150 Center Street in the back. So I think that there was an intent to try and make some of those off-trail connections to some of the other trails, but I'm not certain. But I do know that the mile markers were part of the original design. We just didn't have enough money to move forward with them.
Okay. Okay. I just wondered if there was more to the trail that I didn't know about.
I've only ventured down. it
We
once
needed
or
a
twice
map for
myself.
a straight paved line.
There two more trail systems that are included in this, the Center Street Greenway. That one's 3 benches, 30 trail markers, 14 trail signs, 8 trail map signs, and 2 kiosks. And then the Town Forest Reservation, 4 benches, 18 trail markers, 10 trail signs, 4 trail maps, trash container, dog waste container, 2 kiosks, and a bridge. The one thing that I actually like about this project is the money is for materials. All the work is gonna be done by volunteers. So I think it'd be nice to get a, sense of community and help out. I personally have volunteered myself. I don't know much about the trail systems, but I'm pretty good at building stuff, so I volunteered to participate in this. I think it might be a nice way for some people to get involved.
I've had a great time working on those trails in the past.
So is the rec committee the sponsor of this?
Joint venture between the rec committee and the conservation committee.
Okay.
So with the joint venture, then it's more likely that there'll be the volunteerism to back up that.
They seem to have, I forget what they called them, liaisons, if you will, for lack of a better term, for each one of these particular trail systems, and people that are already kind of maintaining them.
Yeah.
So they was pretty well prepared, and they seem to think, within 3 years, no problem getting it done.
What's the total dollars?
73,000.
And it's a 3-year project?
Yep. So per our grant agreement, all the projects are 3-year projects.
Next.
Next up, we have the Groveland Congregational Church Clock and Bell Restoration. They are looking for $25,000. This project aims to replace the existing mechanical clock, which dates back to 1883, with a modern, reliable electric clock system. The project will also restore the bell chimes, which have not been synced to the clock for several years. The restoration will enhance the historical and functional role of the church steeple, a central landmark in Groveland, and provide the town with a reliable, accurate, enduring timekeeping system.
And that was voted in favor by the committee?
It was,
Was it?
it was voted to let the people decide, to bring it to town meeting. We've ran it through town council to make sure there were no problems with doing it where it's a private venture. There's quite a bit of history in the bell in that church. It's a Paul Revere
I
bell,
know,
and
I know.
it's the church that the town had to have to incorporate, so there is some historical significance there.
They do a lot of good things for this town.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm like 50-50 on it. I don't necessarily know that giving to one church over another is the best idea. But the project was well presented. It checked all the boxes. So, it's not my decision whether I like it or not. It's up to town meeting to decide whether that's something they'd like to move forward with or not.
How much was
25,000.
25,000?
And they seem to be ready to go. They were thinking they'd have it done within 6 months.
And that is to, sorry, you probably said this, but
fine.
restore the
They have to, the
area around the bell? I know you
No,
said
the-
to
Bell
restore.
itself.
The clock and the bell, have to work together. There's a problem with the clock, so the clock doesn't work, so the bell can't ring. So they're gonna replace the clock with a new modern electronic clock, which in turn will allow the bell to ring.
Right now, you pull the rope for the bell.
And we are gonna work to making sure it has a historic, preservation restriction on the project itself, and also try and put language in there which has been, spoken about with town council, which would, require that any funds used for this project, if the building was to be sold or anything of that nature, would go back to the town. That they would be required to pay the town for the monies that were given to them to restore the bell. If in fact they no longer used it, something happened, or sell the building, anything like that. So that's been done in other communities as well. So we were going to try and work with the CPC to make sure that that was part of that.
But the Groveland Congregational Church is a private entity.
Correct.
Good. All right, next project is Affordable Housing and Home Repair Initiative. seeking $20,000. This dual-purpose initiative addresses two critical needs within Groveland: establishing a home repair program for income-eligible residents and utilizing funds from the inclusionary zoning bylaw to further affordable housing development. So this is to work with a consultant to come up with what we need to do to come up with the law or whatever we need to write to access those funds. We have the affordable housing funds for the CPC as well as the inclusionary zoning bylaw that right now are untouchable. So this would be the first step in getting access to those.
Those funds just continue to
Accumulate?
accumulate, right?
Yep.
Do you know how much is in the affordable housing?
I think we're at about $1 million on the CPC, and it's about $1 million in the inclusionary zoning
So there's like 2 million that we don't currently
that we
have.
can't use.
We'd like
Use
to
right
tap.
now.
What does that entail?
Rebecca, I'll let you speak to it.
What does
How do we tap into those funds? What does that entail?
So currently, right now, it's the way that the inclusionary bylaw works is that if you do not want to, if you produce more than 4 units, you trigger the inclusionary bylaw. So you can either produce units based upon however total number of units you're proposing, or you can make a payment in lieu of providing that affordable housing, which equates to an equation, which is something that, you're essentially giving $80,000 back. So those monies are sitting in an affordable housing trust fund. The only individuals that are able to utilize that fund are an affordable housing trust, which we do not have, or the Groveland Housing Authority. So the intent of working with the consultant is to work with them to figure out how we could either, one, create an affordable housing trust and how those funds can be utilized, or also work with the Groveland Housing Authority to see what we could do within their capacity to increase affordable housing options here in Groveland. So it will
Did we
take a little
try
bit
that
more of a
once?
closer look at how we can utilize those funds by either one of those mechanisms or something that we haven't yet thought of.
But we tried that before, because you wrote the paperwork on
To
that. So
do,
that didn't work out.
to do what, I'm sorry?
The Groveland Housing, remember?
Yes,
That fell through.
yes.
So why were we going back there?
There could be a potential to partner with them and other organizations. So if their hesitation was their own internal capacity and whether or not they had the ability to manage programs and to take on a project themselves is not something that they could do, they could partner with another organization or a developer where they might not have the same restrictions as a municipality through certain procurement laws, et cetera, that would allow them to explore other ventures that we could not, which is a little bit similar to what an affordable housing trust. They have a little bit more leniency in terms of, being able to move quickly and authority in order to make those decisions to move forward with affordable housing options. So it's not necessarily saying that the Groveland Housing Authority would take on a project for us, but they would maybe now consider working with us to help us identify ways that we could create that affordable housing without, again, tapping into their resources because they're limited.
Well, I like the idea of the repairs, because it's a single scope, it's not too big, and it makes sense,
And it seems like it could cast a really broad net.
yeah, so, it's better than someone down the corner with $50 bills handing us. So the trust has a lot of structure in it, from what I understand.
Yes,
And they control it.
correct.
So selectmen don't have any vote on, no one has it except the.
Correct, so there would be appointed by the select board and other members are appointed, and they would have a lot more authority to act on those real estate type of measures than you would as part of the select board and/or other governing body. But those powers are granted to them, and there is a checks and balance there.
Yeah,
What would it take to put together a trust?
A town meeting vote to establish such.
So a warrant article.
Essentially, yes. But there's just some controversy in terms of whether or not you're relinquishing too much of your authority. So if there was a piece of land that they wanted to purchase in terms of creating affordable housing, sometimes that can be kind of just controversial as to not having to go through the town meeting process, but you've created a trust to allow them to go through this process. So it's kind of, there's a lot of different things that need to be discussed and vetted prior to moving forward.
All right, last one we have on here is an applicant looking for an extension for the Vito Hand Tub Museum, which was originally approved in 2017 and has had 2 subsequent extensions. It's expired again. Project is looking to extend the use of CPA funds to continue the rehabilitation of the museum infrastructure in Town Hall used to display the Vito Hand Tub and restore the Vito Hand Tub. And I don't have the exact, I want to say it's 53,000, and it might be 53,200 that was originally approved.
Doesn't mean it was right. My understanding, because I dropped over here one day, I might be able to find it. The guy restores things like that, and I asked him about how much. It was a lot more than, because we've already had one failed attempt on that project because we way underestimated the cost. But what's wrong with it now? It's got,
I believe it's just a project that just hasn't been completed.
okay, so we take the money back.
It's really hard to argue with you. It's the board's stance that they would like the project to move forward. Personally, I 100% agree with you. I think we should take the money back and we should resubmit a project. I think it's a great project, but as constituted, I don't.
Who sponsors that right now?
The Historic Society, and they have a veto committee.
All right.
Which is not a select board appointed committee, a committee that they formed on their own.
I mean, it seems to me like this money's been tied up since 2017.
Yeah,
It hasn't been available for other projects because it's been tied up for this project since 2017 that has yet to come to fruition.
There was a change in leadership, and the Historical Society is stepping in now to take it over. Again, personally, I'm right there with you. I don't, one of my biggest concerns with it is we'd ask the applicant to verify the quotes and, that can you build what was originally approved for the monies that are left? And aside from assurance from the applicant, we have no proof that that can be done. And I personally, again, I'm not speaking for the board, I'm speaking for me. I don't see how without that assurance, how we're not gonna end up with a half project and then what happens?
And then they demand the rest of the funds to complete the project.
But we've already spent
because you
half
can't
the
have-
money, so now we have to spend the rest of it to finish it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I'm not, again, personally. a
And
big
the
fan of
community
this.
preservation, again, voted,
It was a split vote, it wasn't unanimous.
it wasn't unanimous.
well,
And the split votes will be noted on the warrant.
So legally, the CPC does not have to put this particular article on the warrant because the project applicant has the ability to use town meeting to extend the project deadline. Because the project was submitted originally with an extension date, it becomes a matter for town meeting. If in fact it didn't have an extension date and there was a grant agreement in place, then they would be held accountable to the CPC in terms of whether or not that application would make it before town meeting. But because this predated kind of what Adam has been trying to do and clean things up and structure things a little bit more, it kind of falls in that gray area. So town council had stated that the project applicant has the ability to put or suggest a warrant article to put this forward for an extension. The select board would be the one that could say no, but again, they could go through a citizen petition method of getting that back on the warrant. Whereas if a CPC project comes forward and CPC says, no, you can't go through a citizen petition process to get that on the warrant. It has to be supported by the CPC.
Do we have a bona fide updated estimate?
No.
Well, then that's, so it could be 50,000.
It is 50.
It's
It-
50.
Why would we accept something that we don't even have some kind of estimate?
The problem is we don't really have a say over it.
So if the finance board agrees, you could make an unfavorable recommendation at town meeting for the extension.
Oh, I would do that in a minute. Because if we don't have a good number, but
The last, this is a 2017 number.
the work that was done was way underestimated. So they came back to get more money. We gave them more money, and it's still sitting there. Okay? But anyway, that's to be dealt with at the town meeting, I'm pretty sure.
That concludes the projects for this year.
What's sad about the veto is, you know, that is such a unique piece of history that could probably be more appreciated and better taken care of in a museum, where they would have the resources to restore something like that, and then let a greater number of people appreciate that piece of history.
I think it's a real cool piece of history that Paul Revere made the nozzles for it or what have you. I've learned a lot about it. To me, it's a, you know,
I didn't know Paul Revere had his hands on the veto,
Paul
too.
Revere's got his hands in everything around Groveland. I guess the brass nozzle or the copper nozzle on the hose was a Paul Revere
Awesome.
trinket. But I mean, I look at it, you drive by, you can't even see inside and see it. And that's such a miss to me. But,
Wouldn't have to look great in the Museum of Science in downtown Boston.
or the Haverhill Firefighters Museum,
Haverhill has a firefighting museum, yeah, but other towns
or even in.
use their
Alabama.
veto in some, like, town,
Parades and.
yeah.
Oh, my God, you couldn't take that out.
I don't know.
I
We
think
want to take a chance on
Yeah.
that, the 175th
it'd be like taking the Koran
Yeah,
out
let's-
for a walk.
let's-
Again,
Bring
I
it.
think it's a great project and
Get some scrolls.
a great undertaking to do it. I just don't think this is the right way to do it. I think it, you know, it's a nice piece of history and it's, again, personally, I would scrap the project and encourage them wholeheartedly to get some real numbers, come back
They gotta have real.
and do it. I think it's very much a project worth doing, but I don't think going off with half the information is in the best interest of anybody.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item on the agenda, once my computer lets me back online, it was actually to take a look at the Finance Board report that we distribute at the annual town meeting. So I had sent that along to everyone, and this is what we had presented at last year's meeting. Yep, that one right there.
Yeah.
Where we give a welcome letter, we kind of summarize the general fund, how the tax dollars are spent. So we summarize the budget at a very high level, and then we go through and give information and background about various aspects of municipal budgeting, and then how we're using like free cash, reserve accounts, and, one of the other big liabilities that we have are post-employment benefits, explaining what those are. And then we also go through and talk about the community preservation projects. So this is a report that we always usually seem to be throwing together at the very end of the budget process. So we wanted to just put this out in front of people now. If there's anything you'd like to see in it, if there's anything you say like this, we don't need to have this, we just wanted to give people the opportunity to chime in, rather than, the week before the warrant gets posted, I'm throwing all of this in together and shipping it off. So, I didn't know if people had a chance to look at it or not, or had any
I
feedback.
haven't, but how many pages is it?
It's 8.
It's more than one. It's the same outline to the booklet that we've used for years.
I'm a one-page guy, you know that.
Yeah, I was hoping that Ruth was gonna add some of those enhancements that she talked about that I think we were all in favor of, about, you know, letting the town know how far the finance department has come in the last couple of years, how the audits, reports have been steadily improving year over year over year. The great strides they've made in closing the months and the years in a timely manner, things like that.
Well, that audit information could be included in the welcome letter. There could just be a,
Yeah,
you
and we,
know, when we touch upon the highlights of the accomplishments of the year.
yeah, so we do have a section in like the welcome letter that talks about accomplishments. For last year, we talked about the comprehensive master plan, transferring the bylaws to the E-code platform. We talked about different grants that we were awarded. We do mention the clean audit opinion from the audit firm. So, but again, there's definitely the opportunity to expand on this, because this was something that, you know, Ruth and I used ClearGov, and we pulled together tables and dropped in the language and everything like that
That looks real cool.
to put it all together.
What's this one?
That looks awesome.
So again, you guys can, I just wanted to make sure everyone had it, could look at it, and then if there's anything we want to add to it, to just let me know.
I remember that. It was a good job.
See here. And if I can pull this back up. So then, if no one has anything, we can move on to the next item agenda, which is approval of the minutes from our last meeting.
Move to approve the February 26, 2025 minutes.
Second.
Jim, okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on them? No? Adam, I don't believe you were at that meeting because you were
It's not, I was in
in
wonderful Las
nice
Vegas.
warm weather.
The time change got me. I'm like, oh, I'll be able to zoom in. No, couldn't.
No, that's okay. So all in favor?
All right?
So that would be 5 with 1
Five.
abstention. Okay, the next item on the agenda is to plan our next meeting. So on the select board had reached out through Rebecca to extend an invitation to attend their meeting on March 17th at 6:30. We would participate in the meeting with the intention of voting on the omnibus budget as a whole. We've done that in the past where we've all met as one large group to discuss the budget. That way the conversations about like, why this, do we want to change this? It's all done as a larger group than us doing a small discussion, them going and doing their own separate discussion, and then moving on from there. For those unfamiliar with the process, it's the finance board who, Rebecca gives us a very good budget based on her knowledge with Ellen's help of how they can balance the budget. It's the finance board's role to propose the budget, and then the select board also votes on that same budget that we propose.
Our
And then
recommendation.
our recommendations, and then that is what goes to the town for the annual town meeting. So it's definitely not a one-person process. So we will participate in that meeting. We do have enough people,
I'm out of town, sadly.
we will be missed. So if there's anything specific you want to have discussed, we can just let me know. We do have quorum from our board to attend that meeting. And then the following meeting.
Do we have to post that?
I will post that tomorrow through the town clerk. And then the next meeting on our calendar as originally planned was for March 26th at 5 PM. I believe that one was set to try to go through the draft warrant, if it would be available, or the majority of it.
We do have a draft of the warrant. It's not all going to be completed, unfortunately, but what I can do is I can pull out all of the financial articles, because those are pretty much wrapped up in terms of what we're looking for, free cash allocations, the capital improvement plan, some of the other set-asides that we have, and some of the other general bylaw or other, I don't think there's many zoning bylaws that have any financial interest, but any of the general bylaws or fees or anything like that, I'll definitely pull out and highlight, so you can see what's drafted, and then the highlighted ones will be our areas of focus for the 25th. And then if anything else comes up afterwards, hopefully we have some of those meeting fillers for maybe the following week, if we needed to meet, just to kind of wrap everything up, because we'll need to get the warrant posted on the, legally, we need to have it posted on the 14th. We try and get it posted on that Friday before, so the 11th. So the select board is scheduled to meet on the 31st. So the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks are gonna go by very quickly, and there'll be a lot of moving pieces. But again, hopefully I'll be able to pull everything together for the 26th. But if we do have that carryover, just in case, I'd like, if you could put it on the, or keep it on your schedules, just in case.
Yeah, I think
So-
we had 2 tentative dates blocked off on the original.
Do you know what they were off the top of your head?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I have to go back in the notes.
Hold on, let me look. I might have them in here. I have April 2nd, which is a Wednesday. And then April 9th. So
I'm
both
hoping that
Wednes-
April 2nd will be just the just in case, fingers, like, you know, extra cross to make sure everything is squared away. But hopefully, we'll have the omnibus finished on the 17th, and then the rest of the warrant articles will be very well drafted by the 26th, because then we have zoning article changes, because we have the MBTA 3A zoning that we're going through with the planning board. We have some street acceptance and articles that are before the select board at their meeting that you'll see on Monday. So even if it's not like final draft and still needs legal counsel review, as long as I can get you pretty much the solid document, I think that holdover of the 2nd, just in case something comes out of left field.
We have had that happen before, so.
Yes, we have,
So that's why there's those dates in there, when I plan the schedule.
and I
in the summer.
appreciate that.
Prior planning right there.
Esther 2 comes to mind.
All right, great. So then, moving forward, the last thing is if there's anything that has come up since the time of posting that anyone has, can go down the road. Do you want to start?
Curious where we're at with the trash and recycling, if we can get a little feedback on what the
You
program
get
is.
a whole lot tomorrow.
What's tomorrow? It's a big
Tomorrow's-
meeting?
Tomorrow is a meeting, and then there's a public, we're gonna entertain the public in a hearing and see what they have to say, although I got a good idea what they're gonna say, but, you know, it is what it is. I got 2 ears, no waiting.
Fair enough.
I'm gonna
Isn't that
chew 'em
gonna
off.
be here in this room?
Public workshop is here at
Yep.
6:30
That's
PM
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
We'll meet at 5.
So there will be, the Trash and Recycling Committee will be meeting at 5 to go over the final slides for the presentation, since they had not an opportunity to do so. And then the actual public workshop will begin at 6:30, where they'll have a couple of presentation slides. We'll have the sample carts, and I also believe that the Mass DEP coordinator that we've been working with will be present as well to present some information. And then I think, my understanding is that the committee would like to hear from the public about what their thoughts are after giving them a little bit of information.
We'd like to hear from the public, but I think some of the committee members want to hear what they have to say. That's a little bit different. But, you know, hey, we'll get through it. Is what it is.
Have the size of the barrels been decided?
Not yet.
I think the only thing that's really everybody's in agreement with is a 96-gallon recycled barrel.
Correct. And that's why we do have a warrant article for a free cash allocation to purchase those for the upcoming fiscal year. So that may be something we do, it may be something we don't do, but the trash program itself has not been identified at this point in time, so it will not change.
And sorry for the ignorance, has Yeah, obviously, the contract's gotta go out for bid next year when it ends. Is, you guys entertained, like, having whoever does the next contract provide the barrels instead of purchasing them ahead of time?
There's all kinds of thoughts on that, looking at grants, looking at how we can spread the cost out, giving everybody a free one initially. Anything on top of that, resident would have to buy. Nothing's off the table right now.
Plus all of the haulers that we have talked to, whether they be Waste Management, Mello, Casella, and Republic, and Win Waste have all stated that we, as a municipality, can get them for cheaper than they can. So they will upcharge us, which will be included as part of the contract. Because we'll be able to take advantage of a state contract, and the state contract through the bidding process has already been done, so the prices are lower, and they don't get to take advantage of that contract. So as a municipality, they've stated that if they would do that, they'll consider it, but we should be mindful that we could probably get them at a better price.
And as far as you know, Rebecca, are all the carts, whether recycle or trash, they're all functionally built the same way? There's really no difference from one company's trash pickup system compared to another? They all pick them up the same way, basically?
Yes, they're gonna have that metal bar in the middle that the hook comes out,
Yeah.
grabs the metal bar, picks them up, dumps, puts it back.
Okay, so regardless of whatever firm you go with to purchase these recycle bins and/or trash barrels, they'll all basically look the same?
Essentially,
They're all standardized, yeah.
yes.
Yep.
So, more to come on that.
A lot more to come on that.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
No, listen, it's one
You
of,
sit next to the guy, wanted the inside scoop.
it's one of the elephants in the room, along with the water and the Whittier project, you know what I mean? That, listen, we gotta find a solution one way or the other.
Yep.
Ignoring things don't make them go away. So, I
Agreed.
know some people believe in that philosophy, but, you know, hope is not a strategy.
Well,
Yeah, I
and I
think
think
that-
it's important for, you know, from my standpoint, that this board at least somehow supports the notion that addressing the trash contract is an absolute necessity to this town. It is it's a large portion of the budget that's gone up exponentially year over year. And, you know, I know it's a personal thing for a lot of taxpayers. It's one of the tangible things that they see for their tax dollars. But it's it's not just where we think it's a good idea. It's really a necessity in order to keep the rest of the town services in place.
Absolutely.
It has to be addressed. And I just think that's a really important, very high-level topic to be addressed and supported by not just the Trash and Recycle Committee and the administration, this board, the Board of Selectmen. I think that everybody needs to be at least collectively on board, that this needs to happen.
And I think to add to what Ruth is saying, that the water issues that we're having also probably even trump that. You know, as far as, you know, an individual that lives in town, you know, our water issues are really, I would think, the top priority of the town and its residents. If there's no water, there's no town. So I can see that being a very hot topic also at the annual meeting.
Those things touch close to home.
Correct.
So they tend to be very emotional. They tend to be very, how should I say, you know, almost territorial. There's an entitlement feeling. You know, I turn on the water, I turn on the tap, the water should come. I put on my barrel, it should get picked up. But there's a limit, like there is in everything in life. You know, what you can suck out of the ground as far as water and what you can dump into the land as far as trash. Something eventually has to
yeah.
give.
I guess at the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, you have all these checks and balances and all this weighted stuff that we're putting out to the population to vote, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, but water will always rise to the top. Simply because, you know, without the water, there's no need to be, you can't have a town without the water. And it's my fear that depending on which of the two options the community decides to go with, they'll always favor that over paying for other stuff. Even over
That's
schools.
if you're on town water. If you're on a well, it's irrelevant to you.
Well, that's true, but you gotta remember, most of the high-density living in town is on town water. You may have outlier homes out, way out, I agree, they're on, their own water systems, their own septic systems, I agree with that. But the majority, I think, of the population is on town water. And like I said, I'm just making the point that I think that's just something we need to be cognizant of when we meet with the select board tomorrow to discuss favorable and unfavorable positions, that I think we need to put it in their head that this water issue, I think, is gonna rise way above even the school to some degree, because it's a big thing. It's a big thing, whether people pay for the hookup to Haverhill, or they go for the water treatment plant. It's a big ticket item for everybody to put in the back of their head, figure out what's the best way to go. And they're gonna look at it simply from the perspective that, well, it's gonna cost me a lot of money. Okay, so if that's true, then they're gonna put their priority into that versus going for any sort of override for anything else in town. Whether we or the select board can justify it as, no, we should really think you should consider this. That's my fear. How do you convince people that, we'll say, both of these options are needed? So like water in the school, water and, paying for police and fire services, things like that.
You've got a lot of competing priorities right now in this town. And that's our job, to figure it out. We're either up to it or we're not, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
I like a challenge.
That's what you signed up for.
That's right. Well, I mean, I know personally, where I lean, but that's me as an individual, not as a board member, so I'll just keep that to myself.
Yeah, if they told you this would be easy and there'd be no math, they lied.
Oh, well, I always know there's math, and I like math, so that's not a
Oh,
problem.
there's sheets of math, it's ridiculous.
Awesome.
All right, Bill, did you have anything?
There's not enough time in the day to discuss what's happened in the last couple of weeks, please. Just
All right, Ruth? Okay, Jim? All right, great.
Call for adjournment at 6:21.
Seconded.
All right, all in favor?
Aye. I beat you to it.
Unanimous. Thank you,
I
everyone.
knew you were going there, so I just jumped the gun.
Bye.
It's muted.